Hey guys, Chili B here again, and today we're diving into the long awaited Ethlizards staking system. We're just going to go step by step through the Prelim LIP and try and break down the more complicated parts. Basically, this proposal tries to outline the staking mechanism for Genesis lizards and V2 Ethlizards, so that staked Ethlizards receive a portion of the DAO's revenue. And there's two goals in doing that. The first one is that revenue is distributed to NFT holders, obviously. And the second one is that it reduces circulating supply to help stabilize the DAO. I'm guessing it does that indirectly by incentivizing Ethlizard holders to become long-term holders and not flippers. And implicitly, if you're a long-term holder of something, you're more likely to contribute to the community in some meaningful way, maybe just being a positive member, maybe creating content, maybe writing LIPs, something like that. Whereas if your incentive is to flip, you're more likely just to buy the PFP and then try and flip it for a small profit and not really ever touch the DAO or the community. So that's how I think they're hoping this stabilizes the DAO and the community. The first thing to understand, and probably the most important thing to understand, is the locked lizard NFT, which are called LLZs for short. These LLZs are built off an ERC 998 standard, which basically allows one NFT to own another NFT. You can also own tokens and stuff like that. I've gone over it in a little bit more detail in one of my previous update videos, so you can check that out if you're interested. Basically, the use case of this implementation is that it gives us more security and flexibility in how we use our LLZs, while still maintaining the base use case of NFTs, which is basically tokenized proof of ownership. So they go through this example. A user stakes their NFT in a cold wallet, and the LLZ that's given to them can be sent to a separate hot wallet to sign messages. And then even if that hot wallet gets compromised, the user can just use their Ethlizards NFT, which is still stored in the cold wallet, and presumably the owner of the LLZ, to recall the LLZ, resulting in no loss to the user. So their NFT, their Ethlizards NFT, is still safe in the cold wallet and it never leaves, and the LLZ can be in any hot wallet for ease of use, and even if it gets compromised, the LLZ can be easily reclaimed. On a side note, the LLZ can also have a few extra traits that the underlying PFP doesn't. So you might add horns or laser eyes or whatever. And the purpose of that is purely just for fun. It's cosmetic, doesn't change anything in any significant way. That's how the system will function in terms of tokens. And I think that's pretty simple and self-explanatory. The complicated part, I think, is how the rewards are distributed to each staker. They're building for two main goals. They want to allow early stakers to have benefits for staking over a longer period of time, but they also don't want that to turn off people joining the community later on. And on the surface, those two seem mutually exclusive. If it's more beneficial to stake for a longer time, people that come later on are less incentivized to join. But I think the team's got a pretty interesting solution to that problem, which will involve a rebasing mechanism. So you might remember rebasing if you were around for Ohm and Ohm fork season. But if you weren't, or if you kind of missed that whole DeFi fad, basically rebasing is when the token supply is a bit elastic. It can grow and shrink for whatever purpose the devs want it to grow and shrink for. The main use case during Ohm season was so that people's tokens wouldn't be diluted. So basically, if you staked your tokens into a rebasing contract, it would make sure that your percentage ownership of that overall tokenomic structure would remain the same. No matter how many new tokens got pumped out, you would get enough new tokens to make sure that you still owned X% of the overall circulating token supply. So if you bought 1% of the overall tokens, you staked that whole 1%, and then they printed 50 billion more tokens, you would get enough tokens to make sure that you still owned 1% of the overall tokens after that 50 billion was minted. And the same can happen in reverse as well, but I didn't really know of many projects that actually did that. So the Ethlizards team is taking that idea of an elastic supply of tokens that can grow and shrink as needed to basically pull off two goals that seem to be mutually exclusive. So have a benefit for early stakers, plus not discouraging later stakers. And they go ahead and explain the system they're going to use to do that. I'm going to jump to a slide because it might make it a bit easier to explain. So there's three big variables in their rewards mechanism or their rebase mechanism. And I'll keep the language the same as what they use in the document so that if you read the document later, it doesn't confuse you too much. The first variable is X, which is the total number of lizards staked. Then there's the variable Y, which is the total value of lizards staked. And we'll talk about how that value is calculated in a sec. And the third variable is the value of your lizards staked. And actually there's a fourth variable, which is the rebase amount, which in our case is an increase of 0.5% per day. So each day the supply increases by 0.5% per day, and the value of your lizards will increase by 0.5% per day as well to keep in line with that inflation. So if we throw in some numbers to make it a bit more understandable, let's say we have 100 lizards staked to start with, and the total value of those lizards would be 10,000. And that's because when a lizard first enters the contract, regardless of if it's been in the contract before or not, it is worth 100 points of value or whatever measure this is. And then let's say that you or I stake 2 lizards. So the value of our lizards is 200. And then the next day a rebase happens and the value of the lizards increases by 0.5%. So now the total value of the lizards is 10,050 and the total value of our lizard is 201, or our lizards is 201. Notice the total number of lizards hasn't changed yet. And then there's another rebase, still no more new lizards. The new total value of the lizards is 10,100. The new value of our lizards, 202. But then let's imagine a new guy comes in and he buys 2 lizards and he stakes 2 lizards. So the value of his lizards now are 200. So smaller than ours because we've been staking for a while and we've got our rebases. Keep an eye on the difference in value between our lizards and the new guy's lizards. Right now it's 2.005. So the new values before the rebase are now the total number of lizards are 102. Total value of lizards is 10,300 because his 2 new lizards are worth 200 in total. The value of our lizards is still the same. Value of his lizards is 200. And then we rebase again. Total lizards is now 102. Total value is 10,350. Our lizards have gone up to 203. His lizards to 201. And let's imagine another 7 rebases and the numbers all increase in line as well. So you can see there's a clear advantage of staking early with rebasing, because now you can see that the difference between the value of our lizards has grown from 2.005 to 2.08. And the more rebases we have, the more that number's going to grow. So our value in an absolute sense is increasing at a faster rate than his, and he'll never catch up. That makes it a massive advantage to stake early. But if you remember, the team had a second goal of making it worthwhile for later stakers as well. And that's where this second mechanism in the rewards system comes in. It's this idea of a soft reset. It's calculated by this formula up here, which you can read and look into yourself if you're interested. Maths isn't my strong suit, but from what I can see, this formula slashes the accrued rebase amount by 80%. So it doesn't slash the total value of all lizards by 80% or the value of our lizards by 80%, but just the value that our lizards have accrued on top of the base amount, which is 100 points per lizard. And this soft reset gets triggered whenever there's a revenue distribution. So that might be every 30 days, every 90 days, or a variable amount of time. So let's imagine there was a revenue distribution now, and we all had our accrued rebases slashed. So not the base value, but just the amount of rebases we've accrued slashed by 80%. There's still 102 total lizards, but now their value in total is 10,200. And the value of our lizards is 202. And the value of the new guys' lizards is 201. And you can see now that the difference in absolute value between our lizards and his lizards is only 0.82. So by holding for long enough to go through a soft reset, the new staker has actually closed the distance between our value and their value, assuming the same number of lizards staked. And so from here, if we continue to do rebases again, we'll still creep ahead of them in an absolute number, but it won't be as big as it would have been if we had never done this soft reset. And so we'd rebase until the next soft reset, it'd slash by 80% again, and so the distance between us would be even smaller. And then we'd build rebases on that, slash, distance becomes even smaller. Mathematically, I think the distance will never close to zero, but I'm sure at some point it would get to such a small amount that it's basically equal. So that's a really interesting solution to giving early stakers an incentive to stake early, but also to giving later stakers an incentive to come in even though they're later. And I think this is super clever because it gives a way for new stakers to eventually be treated as though they staked right from the beginning. But the real genius of it is that the way they can be treated as though they were staking from the beginning is by holding and becoming a long-term staker. So the more I think about this, the more genius it is. There's clear advantage of people getting in early, but people that get in later can also close the gap between them and the early stakers by becoming a long-term staker, just like the early stakers. So basically, it makes everyone want to be a long-term staker. So really smart, in my opinion. We'll discover if there's any unexpected consequences of this down the road, but it seems like a pretty good system at the moment. I've just explained the rewards mechanism part in this section, but feel free to read their own words if you want to get a bit more detail or if something wasn't clear. But basically what I showed you in the table a second ago is illustrated really by this orange line, or this grey line, or this yellow line. So you can see with every revenue distribution, late stakers move closer to early stakers, which are this green line here. Something really cool to point out is this staking simulator, which was made by Seagolem. So big shout out to Seagolem. I love this type of stuff. In this simulator, you can kind of muck around with all the variables, like how long you're staking, how many lizards you're staking, how much RevDiz is coming out. And you muck around, slide these bars around, and it recalculates for you how much total revenue distribution you're expected to earn. So I really encourage you guys to get onto this Ethlizards Notion site, muck around with this simulator because it's pretty fun, and turn up all the values to max and see how much comes out. Or maybe don't do that because it's a bit too bullish, but it's a lot of fun. Thinking about locking the staked Ethlizards now, there is an initial 90-day lock when you stake, and they say this period is non-negotiable. But after that 90-day period, then you have the option to instant unlock at any time. And what happens then is you trade your LLZ token for your original Ethlizard, and then if you want, you can sell your Ethlizard on OpenSea or whatever it is. It says here they will also be immediately removed from the staking pool and lose RevDiz eligibility. My understanding of that is that if in that 90-day period there were no revenue distributions, if you remove your lizard and there's a revenue distribution after that point, you don't get anything, even though you staked for 90 days previously. Connecting that back with the rebase mechanism, there still is an advantage for staking for a long period of time before the actual revenue distribution, because in that period of time you're earning the rebases leading up to that RevDiz. If you stake just the day before the RevDiz, you're going to have a minimal percentage of revenue distribution compared to if you started staking right from the very beginning or from right after the previous RevDiz. And that's illustrated in this blue line here. So if you start staking from the start, you earn all the rebases and you have max RevDiz. But if you come and start staking further down the line, you'll have a smaller percentage of RevDis. But then once the soft reset happens, that kind of jumps back up and you can jump into staking and earn the max potential you'd be able to from the next RevDis. And then over time, as we mentioned before, the more rev distributions you hold through, the more soft resets you hold through, the closer you get to being treated as though you staked from the very, very beginning. So really clever mechanism, and I haven't seen anything like it in any other project. I'm just assuming it's totally brand new to the Ethlizards team. There's some big brain discussions going on in the Discord thread for Prelim LIPs. So if you're interested in diving into this in a bit more depth, you should head into that thread and see what other people are thinking, and maybe throw in your 2 cents as well. In terms of timing of revenue distribution, it seems like it's going to be a totally case-by-case basis. So an investment's made, the investment's unlocked, and then the council chooses when to liquidate. And at that point, rewards are distributed, but only if there's more than 50,000 USD to be distributed, because it'd be a waste of transaction fees to do it for smaller amounts. Looking at the timeline, they're releasing the draft LIP, which is what we're reading today. There's going to be 1 week of community discussion. Then the final LIP's confirmed and voted on. They'll finalize the development of the final iteration of it, which was confirmed in the LIP, and perform audits. And then once they're done, staking V1 launches. So super exciting time. We've been waiting for staking for a while, and it seems like it's pretty close now. And they want to make a note to say that all community feedback is considered, but it's impossible to add every new feature that every person suggests. There's a lot of different types of limitations to what they can put into a contract, and not every idea might be the best. And they say so it needs to be handled by the developers, which I 100% agree with. So that's it for staking V1. An exciting note that they finish on is that this is just one part of a bunch of future proposals that they're going to propose to add additional value to the Ethlizards. So as long as we've been waiting for staking, it seems like the team has much, much more in mind, which is super exciting. So I hope this has helped you get your head around the prelim staking LIP. Make sure you vote one way or the other when it comes time to vote. And if this has been helpful, give me a like and subscribe, leave a comment or something. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks guys, I'll see you next time.